India Ratings has published the FY23 mid-year outlook on microfinance institutions. The report is titled Growth Revival and Credit Cost Expectations to be Maintained. In this episode of the Expert Lounge, we understand what's happening in the microfinance space. Hi, I'm Siddharth Rego, and I have with me today Aishwary Khandelwal, Senior Analyst at India Ratings, who will take us through the microfinance sector outlook. Aishwary, welcome to the Expert Lounge.
Hi, Siddharth. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, so Aishwary, I've written a really detailed report and I had a chance to go through it. I realized that the rating outlook is stable, while the sector outlook is neutral.
Right.
And during this podcast, let's deep dive into this topic and understand what are the basis or assumptions for arriving at this conclusion.
Right.
So let's start with credit costs, Aishwarya. We have seen high credit costs in first quarter of FY23.
Right.
Despite that, do you expect lower credit costs for the full year FY23 as compared to fiscal year FY22 or not?
Right, Siddharth. So that majority of the credit cost you see in the first quarter is from the restructured pool, which MFIs did during the COVID period. Now, given the short-term loans of these MFIs, the repayments of the restructured pool has already started. Okay. And whatever the stress you see there in the restructured pool has already incurred till the first quarter of the year. And some of it we will also see in the second quarter also. But for the expectations for the rest of the years, now we see improved collection efficiencies. As you can see from the figure 4 of my report, I mean, it has consistently improved from June 21 to the first quarter of the year. And also the delinquencies are under control now with 90 plus DPD bucket and the stressful buckets of 0 to 90 DPD with PAR 0 plus number has fallen to 6.8%. Right. In June 2022 from the highs of 30% in June 2021.
Okay.
So thus we see, I mean, these early indicators, we see limited incremental credit costs for the rest of the years from the pre-COVID from the post-COVID disbursements. And bulk of this credit cost has been already incurred in the first quarter of FY23.
Right. Speaking about disbursements, we have seen a decline in disbursements in first quarter of FY23.
Right.
What are your thoughts for the full year FY23? Do you see this increasing or decreasing?
Right, Siddharth. So there are for the first quarter there are two things here. For the first quarter, generally we see a lower disbursement in the first quarter due to inherent cyclicality in the sector. You can see in the figure 3 of my report. For the first quarter of the previous 2 years also there was slower disbursements. Although there was COVID related impact also there. But generally we see lower disbursements in the first quarter of the year. And secondly, NBFC MFIs are implementing changes in their systems and processes post the implementation of the new regulations, which they need to adhere from April 22 onwards. Which is, I mean, they need to risk their pricing based on risk. So now further we see, I mean, generally we see 40% of the disbursements occurs during the last quarter of the year. So our expectations for the full year is 22 normalized growth of 20 to 30%.
20 to 30% growth year on year.
Correct.
Interesting.
Correct.
What about policy rates, Aishwarya? The impact of policy rates. You've seen policy rates increase by say 140 bips in the current year, and you're expecting another further 50 bips increase to add to this. Yeah. Do you expect this to increase the profitability of microfinance institutions or not?
Right. Right, Siddharth. So as I told in the previous questions, MFIs under the new regulations, which is overall positive from the pricing perspective for the NBFC MFIs, because with the implementation of this, there is now risk-based pricing as against earlier, wherein there was cap on lending rates. So with the implementation of this, we expect NBFC MFIs to increase their lending rates by up to 4%. But it would be interesting to see, I mean, which would cover the borrowing costs, expected increase in borrowing cost of the NBFC MFIs by 75 to 100 basis points. But it would be interesting to see whether the MFIs would pass on all the increase in borrowing cost incrementally to the end borrower. So with the implementation of these new regulations, we expect, improvement in the pre-provisioning operating profit margins for the overall MFI sector, and with the slight decline in the credit cost, overall profitability is expected to improve.
Right. Sure. Thanks for putting things into context and explaining what were the key assumptions to arrive at the rating and sector outlook.
Right.
What would be the key takeaway you'd like to convey to our listener?
Right. So key takeaways would be like, after 2 years of elevated credit costs, the tight situations which the MFI seen during the last 2 years, where when we also revised the outlook to negative, and we then revised it back to stable early during the year. We expect credit cost to be around slightly lower on the 1.5 to 5% from 2 to 7% in FY22. Second would be, we expect strong pickup in disbursements for the rest of the years with the for the full year, we expect normalized growth of 20 to 30% in FY23. And thirdly, with the implementation of these new regulations, although it is overall positive, but we have taken a precautionary note because of the impact of the consistently high inflations on the borrowers profile of MFIs. If you can see from the figure 15 of my report, the wages growth has been consistently lower than the rural CPI over the last few months. If this trajectory continues, so we need to monitor the impact of the on the borrowers profile if this trajectory continues.
Right. Thanks, Aishwary. This is really helpful. It was great to have you as an expert today on the Expert Lounge.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Right. So, if you're interested in reading the full report which Aishwary has authored, the link to the report is shared along with this podcast. I highly recommend you have a look at it. But in the meanwhile, that's all we have for this episode of the Expert Lounge. It's a podcast brought to you by India Ratings and Research, because for opinions on risk and credit, India comes to us.